Today on CityCast Nashville, we're learning about the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. It's a great place to take out-of-town guests, but is it just for tourists? Paul Kingsbury, the museum's senior director of editorial, is here with suggestions for ways that locals can take advantage of this downtown institution, too. It's Wednesday, March 5th. I'm your host, Marie Cecile Anderson, and this is what Nashville's talking about. So today, March 5th, a new exhibit called American Currents, State of the Music, just opened. Please tell us about it and what artists are included.
Oh, my goodness. Well, we do this exhibit annually. So we always open it at the end of February or early March. And the idea of the exhibit is to look back at the previous year in country music and feature artists who have done really impactful things and also kind of chronicle the events of the year. We have as usual, a really interesting lineup of artists. We have a long list. Do you want to hear the long list of artists who are involved?
I really do.
Okay, I'm going to try to go through fast, and you can speed it up through the wonders of technology if you need to. So we've got, and this is in pretty much alphabetical order, songwriter Jesse Alexander, Kelsey Ballerini, Kane Brown, Luke Combs, Hardy, Jelly Roll, Cody Johnson, Amethyst Kia, Karine Leon, Shelby Lynn, Megan Maroney, Orville Peck, Post Malone, the Red Clay Strays, Shabuzi, Chris Stapleton, Billy Strings, Taylor Swift, Turnpike Troubadours, Molly Tuttle and her band Golden Highway, Morgan Wallen and Lainey Wilson. So we have, a lot of coverage, a lot of artists who've brought us artifacts of various kinds, costumes, instruments, awards, manuscripts for songs and things like that.
That is incredible. What an amazing, diverse list of people you're including. What do you think it says about the current wave of country music?
I would say that it tells us the current wave of country music is more vibrant than ever. And I should say that those fans who have visited American Currents when we've mounted the exhibit in the past will notice we take a very big tent approach to what's in American Currents. So in addition to the mainstream artists who have big hits on the radio, we include Americana artists, we include bluegrass artists. Sometimes we've even included blues artists. We really try to take a large perspective on country music. And you asked, what do we think this says about the state of country music now? And I have to tell you, I think it's doing very well commercially. Obviously, it's connecting all over the world. Last year, we helped the Royal Albert Hall with a program they did, a festival on country music, and they wanted us to share with them a brief history of country music, which we included in their printed program. And we were able to talk about this amazing panoply of artists that are coming forward in country.
Well, so one person you did not mention that I do notice that it is stated on your website, though, for American Currents, is that you'll also be exploring Beyonce's release of Cowboy Carter. Can you explain that a little bit?
We have produced a large graphic panel talking about the whole phenomenon of Beyonce and Cowboy Carter. And we'll say that, it's interesting because, Beyonce never came out and said, this is my country album, but so many other people felt it was. And in fact, it topped the country album charts. She had songs from it, like Texas Hold'em, that topped the charts. So we thought it was something that really important to talk about.
It's always interesting to think about how current artists will impact the future. Are any of these newer artists going to have bodies of work that are significant enough to be remembered for the long haul? If you had to put money on it, who would you pick?
We really do at our institution hate to make those kind of predictions. I would really hate to pick anybody. I could tell you about my personal, individual favorites, and I would
love to hear that, Paul.
I was not a fan of Post Malone's music prior to his doing his F1 Trillion country album, but I bought it. I bought a physical copy. I absolutely love it. The duets on it are really strong. We're so glad he's featured in American Currents. And I'll tell you, we have an annual celebration to honor the incoming Hall of Fame members. And we asked Post Malone if he would sing a song in tribute of Toby Keith. And so Post Malone performed for us. And he was fantastic. He sang I'm Just Talking About Tonight.
Oh, that's wonderful.
You know, will Post Malone get into the Country Music Hall of Fame? That's going to depend on him doing a lot more country albums. I will say that, you know, you can see if somebody like Miranda Lambert, who is featured in our Unbroken Circle section with Caitlin Butts, somebody like Miranda, who has won so many awards over the years from both the CMA and the Academy of Country Music, you know, somebody like that tends to have a good shot for things like the Hall of Fame. You know, there's an anonymous panel of voters who do that. But I will say, you know, with Caitlin saying, you know, Miranda's an influence on me, I think there are a lot of young artists who feel like Miranda's an influence on them.
The voters are anonymous, but where do they come from?
Oh, this is a very good thing to talk about. So for the elections of the Country Music Hall of Fame, they are conducted by the Country Music Association, the CMA, and have been since the beginning in 1961. And the CMA chooses veteran people who've been in the country music business a long time and reaches out to them and says, we would like you to be an elector. When I say anonymous, it's kept secret until the CMA finally announces each year, usually in the spring, who the next Hall of Fame members will be. The Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum, we house the plaques. And of course, we tell the full story of country music. We tell the stories of these Hall of Famers, and we tell the wider context of country music history that's happened around them.
As a historian, you're obviously aware of the genre's roots in Black music, but in your opinion, does the museum do enough to honor those stories?
We work hard in telling the story of country music in the museum to make sure that all the threads that have combined to make the beautiful tapestry of country music are discussed in one way or another. And I think anyone walking through our museum will feel that if they didn't know it before, they could see very clearly that Black musicians and artists have made a huge contribution to country music. Our core exhibit, Sing Me Back Home, walks people through a history of country music. And one of the earliest cases you encounter, display cases of items, shows a harmonica and a homemade megaphone by D. Ford Bailey, who was a star of the Grand Ole Opry in the 20s and 30s. He was, as far as we know, the first Black star of country music, certainly the first Black star on the Opry. And I'm proud to say that he was voted into the Country Music Hall of Fame in 2005. And back in the fall of 2023, we issued a long out-of-print biography, the only book-length biography of D. Ford Bailey. And it's available nationwide. It's available through our museum store and online through our retail website. I encourage anybody who's interested in the early history of country music, the early role of Black musicians in country music, to read that book. It's really a rich story. And you'll find throughout the museum, as you walk through, various items on display for Black artists who've been contributors to country music, you know, going all the way through people like Charlie Pride and Darius Rucker and Mickey Guyton and on and on. And then every year with American Currents, there are always Black artists who have done something of prominence in the year. This year is no exception.
I have to say, whenever I have a friend come to town, I take him to the Country Music Hall of Fame because it's almost like I get to show off my hometown in that way. And it's just right there in front of them and to celebrate what Nashville is known for. So it's a really amazing place to take friends. But I have to ask, do you think the Country Music Hall of Fame is meant for tourists or locals?
Of course, I'm going to say it's meant for both. I think when the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum was originally opened They probably thought, well, we'll have mostly locals show up. But I've seen newspaper stories from 1967 when the museum opened, and they asked visitors when they came in where they were from. And on the opening day of the museum in 1967 on Music Row, they had people from most of the states in the U.S. And so very quickly we learned at the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum that we do cater to far beyond the city of Nashville and Middle Tennessee. In fact, we have many international visitors. I mean, if you walk through the museum, you'll often hear people speaking in French and German and Spanish and Italian. We are truly an international attraction.
My favorite place in Nashville to take friends from out of town is the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum. It makes me feel so proud to be able to show off our city's country music roots. But y'all, it's not just a tourist attraction. Did you know that local kids always visit free at the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum? Kids age 18 and under who are residents of Davidson and bordering counties, including Cheatham, Robertson, Rutherford, Sumner, Williamson, and Wilson, can take advantage of all the engaging and educational activities the museum has to offer this spring at no cost. Plus, they can bring 2 accompanying adults who get 25% off admission. I love the museum's Taylor Swift Education Center. They've got music, dance, art programs, and on Fridays this month, you can check out Irish step dancing, a musical instrument petting zoo, and plenty of other fun activities. Learn more and plan your visit at countrymusichofoffame.org/local-kids. We are back with Paul Kingsbury. Paul, how did the Country Music Hall of Fame come to be?
In the late 1950s, early 1960s, the board of the Country Music Association determined, the Country Music Association was charged with making country music as popular as possible. They were essentially a marketing organization. In many ways, they still are. Members of the board had visited the Baseball Hall of Fame, and they thought, we should have a Country Music Hall of Fame. So they launched the honor in 1961 with the first 3 people going into the Hall of Fame being Hank Williams, Jimmie Rodgers, and the famous song publisher and producer and song editor of Hank Williams, Fred Rose. So those were the first 3 in the Hall of Fame in 1961. Shortly after that, the CMA board got to work on fundraising and design plans so they could build a Country Music Hall of Fame. The original Hall of Fame and Museum opened in 1967, and we were there on Music Row all the way up to 2001 when the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum opened in its current facility in downtown Nashville.
So in past interviews, I've heard you describe it as a living museum. What do you mean by that?
Oh, we love to call the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum a living museum because it really is. So in addition to the displays we have on artists and musicians across country music history, from the earliest commercial musicians in country music onto today's stars, as are featured in exhibits like American Currents, we also regularly have live programming in the museum. And by programming, I mean we have songwriters who do programs in our Ford Theater, musicians who give instrument demonstrations and talk about how they got involved in the music. We have interview programs. We have concerts. It is very much a living museum where people can come and encounter the music, face to face. We have classrooms in the Taylor Swift education area, and we have a very robust education department and education staff who do outreach to many, many Nashville and Middle Tennessee schools, conduct virtual programs as well online. We have this long-running program called Words and Music, where our educators work with professional songwriters and pair them with classrooms to have the students learn how to write songs. And so, on weekends, those classrooms are often used for special family programs, all revolving around the music in one way or another.
So let's talk about the archives, which are available to anyone doing research work. I feel like a lot of people don't know about this incredible local resource. So would you tell us about how that works and what's in there?
We have the world's largest archive and library of country music items. Now, we have an archive that has more than 300,000 recordings of country music. We have more than 500 instruments, thousands of costumes, all of these things. Now, if a person wants to do research on country music, we have a library. They need to call or email our library and ask for an appointment. We do limit appointments to legitimate research on country music. We don't have a big enough staff in the library to accommodate people to just browse. It's a research library, so our librarians, when they find out the subject that somebody's going to research, they can set them up to listen to specific recordings, or we've got newspaper clippings files from back in the day when printed newspapers were really big. We've got photo files, and depending on what the researcher is looking for, there are a wealth of materials that we can share. We have over 500,000 photographs in our collection. One beautiful thing about it is that we digitized most of these photos and continue to do that, and folks can access our digital photo collection on the web, through our website.
That's really neat. And with the instruments there, can people actually go and say, I can stop by and play the ukulele there? Or
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that we have a massive archive of things like instruments and costumes and paper documents and photographs. Those items are preserved here in the museum for perpetuity, but also as needed to put on display in the museum. I would have to say that we don't allow the general public to wander through the archives. They get to see the cream of what we have on display in the museum. But no, we don't lead regular public tours through the archives. Because we're trying to preserve these things, and the people who work in the archives have a lot to do anyway.
The last time I was there was a presentation on banjos, I believe, and it was so cool to see all of the families there. And then there were several banjos about, and the kids were able to just pick up and kind of play them. And it was really a neat thing to stumble upon. I didn't know it was happening. I had just gone to the museum, but, kind of got to pick up a banjo. That was really neat.
Yes, I'll say that, many of those family programs, somebody will bring in instruments, demonstrate how that instrument is played, and allow children and families to take their own try on an
Stab at it.
It's there. Yeah. And it's I have no doubt that many children have been inspired to go home and nag their parents till they got one of those instruments and start playing.
I also have to mention that I went to Granbury Elementary, and we also did the songwriter experience, and it was very memorable for myself being so young. And then I think we had a night where we presented the songs that we wrote with these songwriters, and that was so formative for me. So I have to thank you all for that. So why is researching and preserving country music history so important?
Country music at its best reflects our culture, our American culture, and a lot of connected cultures around the world where they love country music and make country music. So as you know, so often, because country music song lyrics are so many times storytelling lyrics, they tell us at any particular point in time sort of what people are dealing with in their daily lives, what's important to them. There are universal things that always carry through, like themes about love won, love lost. But there are also many songs about the trials and tribulations of people, and country music reflects who we are as a people, and it's one of America's most vibrant art forms.
If someone comes to the museum without much knowledge or appreciation for country music, what do you hope they walk away with after their visit?
I hope that when somebody comes to the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum, they see themselves in the museum and come away understanding that country music reflects, the best of our culture, that it takes people's hard times often and translates those things into beautiful music. I'll tell you that my parents are from the New York City area, and when they came to the facility that we have here in downtown Nashville several years ago, and I took them on a tour, even though my parents never listened to country music their whole lives, after I took them through the museum, my father remarked, I was astonished at how much of this music I hadn't actively listened to, but I knew. I knew the music of Johnny Cash. I knew some of the music of Patsy Cline, Hank Williams. And he said it moved him to go through the museum. And I hope people are moved and that they feel that it brings them closer to the music for having seen, the actual items that people lived with and used, whether it be instruments, their stage costumes, the amazing original song manuscripts we have, such as Chris Christopherson's manuscript of Help Me Make It Through the Night.
All right, last question. What's your holy grail, the one piece of history or memorabilia you'd love to get for the archives?
I mean, there are so many things, that we, no, I mean, it's hard to say that there's one thing that we would want to have for the museum. We just want to make sure that every artist in country music is aware that, we preserve their history in perpetuity and we tell their story. And so any artist, if they're willing to donate their items to us, it's a wonderful thing. I mean, we were fortunate back last year that a member of the Country Music Hall of Fame, Marty Stewart, arranged to have his entire collection of more than 22,000 objects that he'd collected since he was a teenager come to our museum. And many of those items that Marty brought to us are now on display in the museum.
Do you have a favorite item right now that lives there? Mine is the Elvis's Cadillac, personally. I think that's pretty cool.
I would say that one of my favorite items on display in the museum, which came from Marty, is the first nice stage costume that Johnny Cash had made.
Oh, wow.
It was customized by his mother. It was all black suit, and she went out to some sewing store and bought this metallic edging that she put on around the collar and along the jacket, and it really makes it stand out. And you could tell, that he must have been proud of it because it made him look like a star immediately.
Paul, that is amazing. Oh, and real quick, locals, before I forget, listen up. You can actually check out from your local library a thing called a Community Counts Passport, which means that you can check it out, pick up this lanyard, I believe, or some sort of thing that gets you free admission for the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum, which is such a neat opportunity. So you can go for free, thanks to our local libraries. All right, Paul, thank you again for talking with us today.
Great to be with you. Love talking about our museum. I enjoy it. I work here and I enjoy walking through it.
That's all for today here on CityCast Nashville. And one thing to note, the Country Music Hall of Fame and Museum is one of our advertisers. But this episode was planned beforehand and was purely editorial, which just goes to show we loved them even before they started paying us. If you enjoyed today's show, why not tell your friends, rate the show, leave us a review, and subscribe to our Hey Nashville newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Toodles!